Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. I'm Hannah, and with the release of season 2 of Wolf Hall, I'm going to be going back through season 1 and then season 2 and telling you all of the Easter eggs and references I found in each episode. Please note this is not a review, nor is it a what was accurate video, as this is adapted from historical fiction. We then cut to Jane Seymour receiving a gift. And then we see Cromwell and Edward Seymour, Jane's elder brother, discussing the events that transpired, which align pretty well with what happened in history. Also notice that Jane Boleyn in this scene is with Jane, which is probably how Cromwell found out, as they had kinda set Jane Boleyn up as like a female spy network counterpart to Cromwell. In March 1536, King Henry VIII sent Jane Seymour a purse full of gold sovereigns along with a letter, as a token of his affection. Jane's response was both strategic and virtuous. She kissed the letter respectfully, but returned it unopened to the messenger. Kneeling, she asked the messenger to convey her message to the king, emphasising that she was a well-born gentlewoman from honourable parents, whose honour was her most valued treasure, which she would not endure for 1,000 deaths. If the king wished to give her money, she requested he save it for when God enabled her to make an honourable marriage. This calculated response served several purposes. It portrayed Jane as virtuous and chaste, contrasting with the rumours surrounding Anne Boleyn. It increased Henry's interest in her, as reported by the Marchioness of Dorset, and aligned with advice given to Jane by courtiers who opposed Anne Boleyn. Jane's refusal of the gift was likely influenced by coaching from Sir Nicholas Carew and the Catholic faction at court, who advised her on how to appeal to the king and turn him against Anne Boleyn. This incident occurred during a critical time, as Anne Boleyn's position was becoming increasingly precarious, and it demonstrates Jane's political acumen and her family's ambitions as they manoeuvred to position her as a potential replacement for Anne. Later, in a shadowy exchange with the Imperial Ambassador Eustace Chapuis, the two men talk about recent events. Chapuis talks about how the concubine wore yellow to celebrate Catherine's passing, and how she thought it might change her position, but not in the way she thinks it would. There is so much to unpack from this small exchange. Firstly, Chapuis uses the term concubine to refer to Anne Boleyn, a term that is synonymous with him and his referral to Anne. If you are brushed up on your Tudor history, I'm sure that doesn't shock you. Secondly, his very visible disgust at the fact that she wore yellow. Some have argued that yellow was the colour of mourning in Spain. And when I say some, really it was Alison Weir. She put it in her book once, she made a mistake, and it just gets repeated all the time. And unfortunately, I also have that book that she put it in, so whoops. It was not the colour of mourning in Spain. But Chapuis' reaction in this scene shows that Hilary Mantel is playing to the other opinion in that this joyous colour was worn as a snub. He then talks about how Anne thinks Catherine's passing will change her position, but not in the way she thinks. What he says here is very true, as all the time Catherine was alive, Henry would not have dared to get rid of Anne, as it would undermine him and the actions he has taken up until this point. Whereas with Catherine gone, Anne's safety net is gone. Chapuis then asks Cromwell about this Seymour girl, to which Cromwell does correct him. This is a reference to the fact that Eustace Chapuis did indeed spell Jane's surname incorrectly. In his letter dated the 1st of April 1536 to Emperor Charles V, Chapuis referred to Jane Seymour as Mrs. Semel. This misspelling of her surname as Semel instead of Seymour appears to be consistent in Chapuis' writing during this period. But, he also did write it on the 1st of April, so maybe it was a bad April Fool's joke. It's worth noting that variations in spelling were common in Tudor times, especially for names. However, Chapuis' consistent use of Semel suggests it was more than a simple spelling variation and likely stems from his unfamiliarity with the English pronunciation or spelling of Seymour at the time. Cromwell then reflects on his precarious role at court. I have influence on King Henry, but I do not claim to govern him. To succeed with Henry, you have to anticipate his desires. But then, if he changes his mind, you stand out there exposed. Chapuis responds with a chilling warning. It's Anne you should fear. She's desperate and dangerous. You should strike first. This conversation underscores the volatile nature of Henry's court, where alliances shift rapidly and survival often depends on striking preemptively. Chapuis, a staunch ally of Catherine, had long viewed Anne as a dangerous obstacle to Anglo-imperial relations, and his counsel to strike first hints at the political machinations that would lead to her downfall. This moment also foreshadows the tragic events that would later unfold in 1536. Anne's enemies, including Cromwell himself, would soon seize the opportunity to orchestrate her downfall by feigning illness for 2 weeks. The charges brought against Anne, though likely fabricated, reflected the broader context of Tudor politics, where personal grievances, factional rivalries, and Henry's own whims dictated the fates of individuals. Oh my god, the next scene is one of my favourites. My only complaint here is that I was under the impression that Anne and Eustace were in a more confined space, hence why this happened, but nonetheless I absolutely loved it. Anne is dressed in red and gold, oozing regal opulence and power, exerting every inch of her power as queen. The show suggests that the following event that was depicted on screen was orchestrated by Cromwell, but history gives the credit to Henry. On the 18th of April 1536, the Tuesday after Easter, Eustace Chapuis, the imperial ambassador, encountered Anne Boleyn for the first time at Greenwich Palace. This meeting was carefully orchestrated by Henry VIII to compel Chapuis to recognise Anne as queen. As Chapuis entered the chapel, led by George Boleyn, Anne's brother, Anne deliberately stopped for him to bow. Chapuis, caught in a diplomatic predicament, had no choice but to return the gesture. He later reported to Emperor Charles V, "She was courteous enough, for when I was behind the door by which she entered, she returned, merely to do me reverence as I did to her." This exchange was significant for several reasons. One, it marks the first time Chapuis acknowledged Anne as queen in the 7 years since her rise to power. 2, it represented a potential shift in diplomatic relations, as Chapuis' actions could be interpreted as the emperor recognising Anne's position. And 3, it occurred during a critical period when Anne's influence was waning and Jane Seymour's was rising. Despite Chapuis' attempts to downplay the incident in his reports, the encounter upset the Lady Mary, who felt betrayed by this show of respect to her stepmother. The event highlights the complex political manoeuvring at Henry VIII's court and the precarious position of Anne Boleyn in the spring of 1536, because if she wasn't in Henry's good graces at this point in time, he would not have orchestrated this event. Chapuis approaches Henry VIII to propose an alliance with Emperor Charles V, arguing the mutual benefits for both nations. With Catherine of Aragon's death removing a major obstacle to reconciliation, the prospect seems viable. However, Henry's reaction is anything but measured. In a sudden eruption of fury before the court, Henry airs a litany of grievances against Charles, recalling perceived slights and betrayals. His voice rising, he lifts his hand as if to strike the stunned ambassador, roaring, "Tell him I am not an infant. I demand a profound and public apology." Despite ironically acting like an infant, Henry's anger then shifts to Cromwell. Storming towards him, face flushed with rage, the king spits venomous accusations. "You have gone too far. You have put my honour in jeopardy. But what would a man like you know about the honour of princes? You think you are the king, and I am the blacksmith's boy, don't you? Don't you?" This scene captures Henry VIII's volatile personality and the precarious nature of serving at his court. Historically, relations between Henry and Charles V had been fraught for years, largely due to the fallout from Henry's divorce or annulment from Catherine of Aragon, Charles's aunt. Although Catherine's death in 1536 removed one barrier to reconciliation, Henry's lingering resentment towards Charles, combined with his obsession with preserving his honour, remained a significant obstacle. Henry's demand for a profound and public apology underscores his insistence on being treated as an equal on the European stage, reflecting his deep insecurity about England's relative power compared to France and the Holy Roman Empire. The king's verbal assault on Cromwell reveals another layer of court dynamics. Cromwell, as Henry's most trusted minister, had risen from humble origins, a fact that made him a target for the aristocratic disdain. Henry's accusation, "You think you are the king and I am the blacksmith boy," taps into these tensions, emphasising how quickly favour could turn to fury in the Tudor court. The remark also reflects Henry's obsession with the concept of royal honour, which he believed Cromwell, as a commoner, could never fully grasp. Cromwell, pale and trembling, raises his hands and crosses his wrists in an instinctive gesture of submission. His voice quavers as he says, "God preserve your Majesty, and now, if your Majesty will permit me, I shall take my leave." Later, slumped in a chair, Cromwell's mind drifts back to his childhood. He recalls the day he burned his arm as a boy. His father, gruff and relenting, had said, "Cross your wrists, it confuses the pain." The memory feels oddly relevant now, as though his body remembered the lesson before his mind could process it. The encounter with the king had left him shaken to his core, a dangerous reminder of how fragile even his towering position truly was. Interrupting his thoughts, George Boleyn saunters into the room with an air of triumph, smirking. Anne's brother looks down on Cromwell and sneers, "You are not a gentleman born. Never forget who you serve." Cromwell fixes his gaze on George, his face a mask of calm. His voice is measured, almost serene, as he replies, "I shall profit from this lesson." George, who is clearly pleased with himself, misses the glint of steel in Cromwell's tone. He doesn't see the danger lurking beneath the surface, a danger that would soon engulf him and his family. This scene highlights Cromwell's complex psychology and survival instincts in the perilous Tudor court. His crossing of the wrists symbolises both submission and ingrained mechanism for enduring pain, a physical manifestation of the resilience he learnt in his brutal childhood. It also reflects how Cromwell's past continues to shape his response to the unpredictable and often violent world of Henry's court. George Boleyn's intrusion emphasises the class tensions that dogged Cromwell throughout his rise to power. As a man of humble origins, Cromwell was constantly reminded of his outsider status by the noble elite, who viewed him as a threat to their traditional privileges. George's taunt, "You are not a gentleman born," encapsulates this disdain and foreshadows the animosity that would fuel Cromwell's eventual enemies. Cromwell's chilling response to George, "I shall profit from this lesson," carries layers of meaning. On the surface, it appears deferential, but its undercurrent of menace signals his calculating nature. Cromwell was known for using perceived slights or defeats as opportunities to turn the tables on his rivals, and this interaction foreshadows his role in orchestrating the downfall of the Boleyn faction. At the next meeting of the King's Council, Chancellor Audley carefully broaches the topic of forging an alliance with Emperor Charles, emphasising its importance for the stability and prosperity of the kingdom. Henry listens intently and, after a moment of contemplation, agrees. He then turns to Cromwell, who has been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the discussion. "Walk with me," the king commands. In the palace gardens, away from prying eyes and ears, Henry's demeanour softens. In his own way, he offers something resembling an apology. "You are my right hand, sir," he says, his voice tinged with both gratitude and expectation. Then, without preamble, he shifts to the matter that weighs most heavily on his mind. "I cannot live as I have lived. You must free me from it. Free me from Anne. I trust in your discretion and skill." Later that evening, Cromwell sits alone at his desk, the flicker of candlelight illuminating his face as he broods. His mind churns with the enormity of the task ahead. To dismantle a queen and a faction is a dangerous undertaking, even for him. As the room grows darker, a shadow seems to lengthen and take form. It is Cardinal Wolsey, Cromwell's beloved mentor, and the man whose downfall had once shaped Cromwell's own path to power. Wolsey's voice, calm yet heavy with foreboding, cuts through the silence. "Trouble is, Thomas, the king wants a new wife. Fix him one. I didn't, and now I'm dead." The ghost fades, leaving Cromwell alone once more, but its warning lingers. Wolsey's fate serves as a grim reminder of what happens to those who fail to navigate the king's insatiable desires. Cromwell knows the stakes, and he knows that his survival depends on his ability to deliver. This scene encapsulates the perilous dynamics of King Henry VIII's court, and Cromwell's role as the king's indispensable yet expendable advisor. Chancellor Audley's suggestion of an alliance with Emperor Charles reflects the realpolitik of the time, with Catherine of Aragon's death removing a major barrier to Anglo-imperial relations. Such an alliance was both logical and strategical, especially as Henry's international reputation had suffered during Anne Boleyn's tenure as queen. The private conversation in the garden underscores Henry's characteristic reliance on Cromwell to execute his will while distancing himself from the moral and political consequences. Henry's plea to free me from Anne reflects not only his dissatisfaction with his marriage, but also his calculated approach to removing obstacles in his desires. Historically, this moment mirrors Henry's increasing willingness to cast off queens who no longer served his interests, a pattern that would define his reign. Cromwell's brooding and the spectral appearance of Cardinal Wolsey highlights the cynical nature of Tudor politics. Wolsey's downfall for failing to secure Henry's annulment from Catherine of Aragon serves as a cautionary tale for Cromwell, who now faces a similar test of loyalty and ingenuity. The ghost's warning, "Fix him one," captures the unrelenting pressure placed on Henry's ministers to solve his personal and political problems, often at a great personal risk. And that's where I'm going to end today's video. Episode 5 has so many Easter eggs and historical references that this had to be a 3-parter. We have one more episode in Season 1 before we move on to Season 2. I love breaking down the series, however it does take a lot of time and energy preparing the series, and I am finding it a struggle right now. So once Season 1 is finished, I will be taking a break before tackling Season 2. Hope you guys will understand. However, in the meantime, if there are any other movies or TV shows you would like me to do once I finish Wolf Hall, then please let me know. As always, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you really enjoyed the content that I make, then why not leave a super thanks. Until the next one, have a wonderful day. Bye!